And when I say this world, I mean it. I don't mean in an ideal sense. I mean in every day, every little thing you do. It's such a gimme, gimme, gimme. Everybody back off. You know, everybody's like, you taught that from school, everywhere. Big business. If you want to be successful, you want to be like Trump, gimme, 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 push, 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 step, 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 crush, crush, crush. That's how it all is. And it's like, nobody ever stopped. Just, you know, I feel like instead of us just being like, slavery's bad, slavery's down, bad whitey, bad whitey. I mean, all right, let's stop that. And everybody's smart enough to know that, I mean, we've been slighted. And we want ours. And I don't mean by like ours, 40 acres and a mule, because we're past that. But we need help. I mean, for us to be on our own 2 feet, us meaning youth or us meaning black people, whatever you want to take it for us to be on our own 2 feet, we do need help. Because we have been here. We have been a good friend. If you want to make it a relationship type thing, we have been there, and now we deserve our payback. It's like you got a friend that you don't never look out for. You know, you dressed up in jewels. Now America's got jewels, and they paid and everything, and they lending money to everybody except us. And it's like, you know, everybody need a little help on their way to being, you know, self-reliant. You know what I'm saying? That's the whole thing about the album, about the Special Olympics. Everybody need a little something and they to be independent. No independent person just grew up and was born independent. You worked and you learned teamwork and you learned cooperation and unity and struggle, and then you became independent. And we have to teach that and instill that. And why is it that they want to do that? I mean, if this is truly a melting pot in the country where we care about it, and Lady Liberty got a hand like this, she really loves us, then we really need to be like that. And it needs to be the black kids. If there's a white person who got money, then he need to help them. He need to help black kids, Mexican kids, Korean kids, whatever. But it need to be real. And it need to be before we all die, and then you say, oh, I made a mistake. We should have gave them some money. We really should have helped these folks. It's going to be too late. You know what I'm saying? And then that's when you got to pay your own karma. And that's when God make you punish. When God punishes you. Because I feel like, you know, it's too much money here. I mean, nobody should be hitting lotto for 36 million and we got people starving in the streets. That is not idealistic. That's just real.
Welcome to the Michael Brooks Show. I'm Michael Brooks. We're broadcasting live from Brooklyn, USA, where left is best as it is everywhere else, with super producer Matt Leck. Wait for it.
Yo.
Head theoretician David Griscom.
How's it going?
Super producer David Slavic is roaming the digitosphere, the ever-expanding TMBS universe, as we are on the march. On this week's program, Matt Taibbi. He's a journalist, reporter, and there goes my music, for Rolling Stone, and is, of course, a legendary reporter and writer. He's joining us in studio to talk about why centrism is not sexy, contra to some dull New York Times columnist who wrote a column saying it was, what's really happening with Russia, and much, much more. He's going to hang out with us through the postgame. We're also going to play Guess the Pundit. Julia Salazar, she is a Democratic socialist running in the Democratic primary for the state Senate in New York's 18th district. We are going to talk to her for the Shoutout, talk about what you can do to help pull off another major upset and win for democratic socialism. Plus, we have a gulag, and you might have a guess as to who's going to be going there. And also, yes, Elon Musk. It was almost like Elon Musk was like, wait a second. Michael's not being hard on me at all. I'm going to do everything that is humanly possible to show what an absolute cretin I am. Plus, we've got an economic update with David Griscom. We've got banter, and we probably will have a very time-appropriate impersonation because Barack Obama was in South Africa at the Mandela Memorial Lecture Series and giving a very cock-like speech, frankly. All that and more on this week's Michael Brooks Show. Let's get it. So former President Barack Obama was in South Africa today, which is Tuesday, where he delivered the memorial lecture for Nelson Mandela. Tomorrow, Wednesday, July 18th, would be Nelson Mandela's 100th birthday if he were in a better world still walking with us. And this is the first major address that Barack Obama has given in his post-presidency. And first, let's play this clip where he talks about the vision and the tradition that he claims for himself.
I believe in Nelson Mandela's vision. I believe in a vision shared by Gandhi and King and Abraham Lincoln. I believe in a vision of equality and justice and freedom and multiracial democracy built on the premise that all people are created equal and they're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. And I believe that a world governed by such principles is possible and that it can achieve more peace and more cooperation in pursuit of a common good. That's what I believe. And I believe we have no choice but to move forward. That those of us who believe in democracy and civil rights and a common humanity have a better story to tell. And I believe this not just based on sentiment. I believe it based on hard evidence. The fact that the world's most prosperous and successful societies, the ones with the highest living standards and the highest levels of satisfaction among their people, happen to be those which have most closely approximated the liberal progressive ideal that we talk about and have nurtured the talents and contributions of all their citizens.
So let's first acknowledge the obvious. It is nice to have a leader inhabiting the world stage from the United States who possesses intelligence, humanity, sophistication, articulation, and a commitment to values that frankly should be so basic and established at this point, we don't need to keep relitigating. But we are relitigating them in an age of far-right barbarism across the globe. But it's also an opportunity to both acknowledge some space where the left and the center can co-inhabit together in terms of very basic things. Understanding that racism is a poison, understanding that we need societies built on mutuality, rights, respects, all of the things that Obama has always been so brilliant at articulating. But here's the deal for liberals. The only way you can get the society that you want is by, first of all, a forthright and serious fight against the forces of bigotry, which will not be achieved by civility. It's going to be achieved by confrontation. And secondly, by a radical commitment to democratizing the economy and socializing and decommodifying mass parts of economic activity to align democracy in the economic sphere with the civil and social sphere. As long as those spheres are misaligned, and as long as such an unbelievable amount of inequality, abuse, oppression, and exploitation exists, there is always going to be a ripe spot in the immune system for the barbarism of our moment. As Bill Fletcher Jr. says, right-wing populism is the herpes of capitalism. And we're living in that disgusting image right now. And if you can't confront those fundamental conditions, you're not going to solve the problem. So the challenge is, okay, let's acknowledge where we share some common values with the center. But the center is going to need to be real about how we preserve those common values. That is the fundamental task. And President Obama went on to at least rhetorically acknowledge some of these problems. Here he is talking about inequality.
An explosion in economic inequality. It's meant that a few dozen individuals control the same amount of wealth as the poorest half of humanity. That's not an exaggeration, that's a statistic. Think about that.
He's absolutely right. And this is the moment where even those of us who can like and appreciate President Obama should sit back and say, I wonder who was president for 8 of those years where this skyrocketing inequality developed. I wonder what recovery had over 90% of the gains go to the top 1%. Now, this is not about scoring points. This is about setting the table so we solve the problem, so we move forward, so we get out of the crisis and the predicament we're in. Because while, of course, these forces reflect moral failings, the roots of systems of oppression and bigotry go to material forces. The wickedness and disgustingness of systemic racism, especially, we can use South Africa as an example, is rooted in systems first of colonial occupation and exploitation, and then a white settler colonial class which wanted to preside over and protect an economic income distribution for itself. And even in post-apartheid South Africa, with the achievements of democracy, which are, of course, so vital, and we have the statistic right here in terms of wealth concentration. The political liberation happened under the ANC, but as Ronnie Kasrils, who I've interviewed for Patrons, former South African intelligence minister and revolutionary, said, the economic liberation has not happened. Land redistribution has not happened. And we're going to talk more about land redistribution on this show because it's going to be a new hobby horse of the alt-right and racist forces to not only lie about what's happening in South Africa, but feed into racial anxiety here. But fundamentally, we're not talking about moral failings. We're talking about economic systems that drive moral failings. And that's a fundamental distinction of understanding of a socialist analysis and a material analysis and a more ethereal one. And that does make President Obama's voice so important. But it also makes the fact that his presidential library is gentrifying a neighborhood in Chicago also extremely important and still part of the problem. So we can align and run off of the great leadership displayed in this speech. But we have to ask, how do we actually safeguard those values? How do we actually truly have a shared humanity, a world that works for everyone? It's impossible without a mass democratization of resources and economy. Guys, please jump in. Griscom was crying at the speech, so I just want to say Griscom gets very emotional because he really loves President Obama.
I mean, I think that the point that you make, Michael, is a good one in that, you know, it is really important for us to recognize that a lot of the values that are sort of put forward by centrists and a lot of very successful politicians, you know, from the Democratic Party throughout history are these kind of universal human values. But it's a lot of times, you know, it gets muddled in how it gets presented. I mean, later on in the speech, you know, Obama talks about how, you know, it's still okay to be rich, you know, you could still be rich, you could still be rich.
And he needs to let go of those talking points.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's like, you know, that's a huge problem. It's like, yeah, you know, he's talking about increasing taxes on the wealthy, but there's still that structural quality that's missing, which is sort of fundamental, at least to my politics and to a lot of people, you know, on the socialist left.
It's not only fundamental to our politics. I'm arguing that it's fundamental to what they want to preserve. Yeah, you are not going to have a liberal, civil, open society in the positive sense, and we should remember that, because as much as we dunk on these people, let's live in reality here. We do want and rely on a lot of those things, but you're not going to be able to safeguard that without a socialized economy.
Yeah, and I mean, that sort of is like the ultimate question about the entire U.S. rhetoric from the beginning is, you know, all men are created equal, and then, you know, the first thing is, well, what about, you know, slavery? You know, what about women? What about working people?
What about Native American genocide?
And 100%. Right. And it's like, and we recognize that, but it's like, here's where these kind of formal freedoms matter, and where these kind of formal ideas matter. That terrain has been sort of shaped already. And you could say this is a land of equality. Now, I wouldn't write an academic paper making that argument, but like, we understand the rhetoric, and it's sort of ingrained in us politically. And you can take that, and then you can expand on that idea, and that can have a very powerful effect. And it's something that, you know, we should be able to do.
So you can say, if you want to live up to those ideals, what's your 5-step plan to nationalize the banks and the fossil fuel industry? Because ultimately, no, those two things are intimately connected, because you cannot have the systems of exploitation or wealth stratification and any type of actual democratic experience. Matt?
Yeah, I agree with basically all that's been said so far. The only point I'd add is I generally think, you know, we have to defeat both centrist liberalism and neoliberalism and fascism, but I don't think we defeat them both at the exact same time.
There's also order of operations, as we always say.
I think Silicon Valley, like regardless, I think number one, we have to beat fascism, and I don't think that's a foregone conclusion at this point.
Right.
But even so, like I fully expect the next 8 years after Hillary won to be basically versus the banks in Silicon Valley.
Yep.
And that's going to be a fight we're still going to have to fight after this. But I do think in the meantime, you have guys like Obama advisors. It's interesting. We always rag on them, but it's also notable to me when they come out in support of we just need to add more Supreme Court justices and also good on punching Richard Spencer, right?
And that's perfect, because those are the Pod Save America guys, right? And credit where credit's due. And this actually is a perfect illustration. Some of the Pod Save America guys, don't worry, I'll still do the routine. Don't worry about it. I'll still do the impression. They're coming out for expanding the Supreme Court, which is a must. They understood that punching Richard Spencer was cool and fun to watch. And Tim Geithner is, among other things, making a killing off of debt collection and terrorizing people in that process, which in a way actually distills the two poles even in the moment we're in now. The prime enemy is fascism, and there are definitely people in the center right now that we can much more readily work and align with, and other people whose prime allegiance really is just to their greed and to those broken systems. And the kind of Pod Save versus Tim Geithner example, I think, distills that pretty well with regards to what's come out of the Obama world.
We were talking to Harvey K last week, and the way sort of George Washington, the Crisis Papers and the pamphlets Thomas Paine went out. George Washington was a big part. He saw the usefulness of that, right? He didn't necessarily agree with Thomas Paine's egalitarianism in a lot of ways. And I do think that's something we have to guard against, and that's what people are concerned about, like when Ocasio-Cortez changes something on her website or something like that, right? Like, there's definitely people are going to find it useful, but that's because it is useful right now, right? And they have power, and we can't trust them to funnel our energies into the right directions, but our energies need to be funneled into certain productive areas, and also their energies too, centrist areas. There are plenty of people who bought the whole Obama thing that are awakening at this moment, and to be sort of dismissive. I think about this a lot as just broadcasters. Let's say I just listen to Pod Save and I come across our show and they just hear us sneering at those guys, right?
Right.
That's not what I want to be either, right?
I agree.
I want those people to be. I want to be.
I don't want to be like, oh, you're just hearing of the clash now.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's really what it is,
it's
right?
Hipsterism,
It's hipsterism of politics. And that's the thing, is being ruthless on the merits and incredibly welcoming on the broadening the tent.
Yeah, and I mean, just a couple things. I just want to add that it is important, though, while we do kind of embrace some kind of historical rhetoric of the U.S., to understand that a lot of the security that we have in this country is based upon of imperialism of other nations.
Definitely.
And the United States has been an incredibly violent force. So when I say, I just wanted to make this clear. So when I say, understand that, one, if you're an American, to understand that there's a kind of tradition and a history and there's a rhetoric that you can uphold, but to not also become a chauvinist, or to forget or to forgive or to be silent about the history of serious colonialism, genocide of Native Americans, etc. So just putting that out there. But I'd like to say to what Matt was saying about this order of operations, defeat fascism, come after neoliberalism, centrism. I think that that's definitely true, and probably the order of events as they will occur. I think it's really important strategically, though, that that doesn't become a call for refusing to build the institutions that will challenge that. I think the best thing we can do to defeat fascism in a lot of ways is sort of what's been going on over the past 2 years with left organizing. I mean, the fact that the DSA is as large as it is today, the fact that we had AOC win here in the Bronx, Julia Salazar's campaign, all across the country, people are becoming really mobilized. But they're not just becoming mobilized in a kind of random way. They're becoming mobilized in a very specific socialist left way. And we can have strategies for how we can build coalitions and work to defeat Trump, etc. But I think that we do it in our own words. We do it with our own people, and we build the movement to incorporate those that we are sort of breaking down. And because we have to do it all together eventually. So it's really important that while we're coming after
Are you saying people to bend the knee?
Bend the
No,
knee.
I'm just kidding. I'm trying to reignite a stupid old internet controversy.
I remember that. But seriously, it's like this is what's so exciting about our time is that we have our own rhetoric, we have our own language, and we have traditions that we can incorporate into that. And I think that, this is a really exciting moment. It's a really creative time. And I think for so long we had so little strategy. We had so little imagination. So many leftists, if you talk to older leftists, they were so secret. They would never talk publicly about being a socialist.
Right.
It was sort of the kind of thing that when you left and the five of you got together, we're like, we're secret socialists. We've been arguing for this one thing publicly. Now I feel like more and more people are very open and saying, this is what I believe. I can make some compromises here strategically for a certain moment. But I don't even like this kind of like... being prepared to compromise before we've even negotiated strategy. I just, but you know
of
what I mean?
course you never do that.
I'm not saying we're doing that. I'm just
The personality of who President Obama is and what he represents specifically is so much larger in some ways than any of these, than some of these questions, frankly. Not on the merits of policy and ideology, but in terms of I guess what I'm saying is there are endless... I don't have to keep saying this. I critiqued Obama on the merits when he was in office. I did shows like this where I talked about everything from drones to banks to his border policies to offering cuts on Social Security and Medicare. Absolutely. And at the same time, this guy, first of all, has really unique leadership capacity. And he's also somebody who has an enormous amount of popularity. And in the same spirit of taking things and bringing it to our ends. It's not like, oh, that's a great speech. Let's go back to well-branded centrist Democrat politics. No. That's a great speech. We share some of those values. And as I say, the only way you want to safeguard and expand those values is with some type of democratic socialist orientation. And that's been proven. We see that.
I think that what's disorienting now is the popular gravity is definitely on the side of the left. So when I talk about working with centrists, I'm talking with centrists that acknowledge that to some extent.
Precisely.
And have respect for that.
Precisely.
And the ones that think that that's all quixotic or maybe like a storm that's going to pass, yeah, fuck those guys.
No, they're delusional. 100%. And if they
100%.
vote the right way, great. But we're not going to do much together because they're nuts. All right. We're going to do a quick... pitch, and then we will get to the shout out, which is going to be a check-in with Julia Salazar. Is the music ready for the pitch, Matt? Oh, thank you. We're back. I believe we're back to Dipset beats. Awesome. On TMBS, we're overt socialists, in contrast to the secret socialists that David Griscom was just talking about. Although secret socialists, that sounds kind of dangerous, sounds kind of interesting.
that would be fun. At least some interesting parties.
Yeah, it would be some interesting parties, or it would be some extremely boring parties.
Fellow traveler is a good phrase. I like that.
We are fellow travelers on TMBS.
I mean, well, we're just out, so we're fellow travelers are like...
There are fellow travelers who occasionally will hit me up and be like, I'm a patron and I work some corporate consulting job, but actually low-key I'm a communist. We're growing. Each step of the way helps us sustain and continue to expand. We've already expanded more than I had initially thought we would when we started. 2,000 patrons is the next major goal for sustaining and making durable what we've already accomplished in the last year since we've begun this show, which really is having an impact. We're incredibly proud of it. I'm incredibly appreciative of all of you. It's a vibrant community. People can reach out to me at any time with any questions you have, ideas, provocations. We're ready. We're growing. This week, TMBS TV. It's a distinct YouTube channel. It's launching. It's going to have the post game with Matt Taibbi is going to be available to the public through it, so people can get a taste at least of the post game. Of course, we have the Illicit Histories Idea Primer series, and in addition to that, that channel is going to be out the gate extremely heavy on exposing the intellectual dark web, or the get the fuck out of here resentful mediocre guys web, or whatever the fuck we're going to call it. So that's going to be dropping very soon. It's time to become a patron. Patreon.com/TMBS. Patreon.com/TMBS. We will be back in a little bit with the Shoutout song by DJ Danarchy and Julia Salazar. Griscom feeling the Dipset. What is that Emma Goldman quote that people quote way too much? It's a good quote. It's just overdone. The dancing revolution or something. I don't want to be part of a revolution. I can't dance.
Dance revolution.
Dance revolution. Emma Goldman.
It was left, right, left, up, down, left, right.
Right. That's what Emma Goldman said. Well, I don't want to be part of any movement that doesn't include Dipset, is my point. And joining us now, a major fan of Dipset and a candidate for the 18th the 18th district in New York City, which is a state Senate race. The primary day is on September 13th, is Julia Salazar. She is a member of the DSA, and she is seeking with increasing momentum. She started very strong out of the gate with an appearance on TMBS a couple months ago, and she has been picking up momentum ever since in that race. Julia, you are tonight's shout-out segment. So do we want to play the shout-out theme for Julia? You ready? Yep. Julia, you're going to enjoy this, and then will tell us what's going on.
And we're back.
Danarchy. I don't want to get greedy, but if Danarchy could give us a shout-out beat, that would be ill.
Top of the line professionalism.
Let's get to the shout-out. Shout-out.
Creepy.
Shout-out.
Weird. I think that's creepy. It's incredible.
Shout-out. All right, Julia, I know it breaks your heart to not hear the rest of that, but I just wanted to give you a flavor of it. This is the shout-out segment. You are the shout-out of the evening. Julia, how is the campaign going, and what are you running on?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. The campaign is going really well. Today was the first major public filing release, campaign finance filing. So a lot of everyone's who is running for office, our fundraising is now public. We have raised nearly $120,000, and
great.
Absolutely none of that has come from corporate donations or for-profit real estate developers, which in my district is especially important. I'm running against Senator Martin Dillon, who has taken more from real estate developers and private interests than any sitting senator. And so and that has then been reflected in the policies that he's supported. So in our race, where we're fighting for tenants' rights, where we're fighting to take back what has been taken from workers and the working class in North Brooklyn, it is especially important that I am accountable to the people of this district and that I'm running a grassroots campaign. So that's just a quick status update from today that we're especially proud of.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a really big accomplishment. So the main issues you're talking about are housing, which is a major crisis for really any non-ultra wealthy person in New York City, and particularly parts of Brooklyn. And what else are you talking about, and what else are you sort of hearing when you go door to door?
Yeah. So we're certainly fighting to expand rent stabilization statewide and to end policies that have been hurting tenants at the advantages of developers. But we're also fighting for universal health care in New York State. We want to pass the New York Health Act, a single payer bill that would make sure that everyone, including our undocumented neighbors, including seniors and elders, people who are currently whose needs are excluded from federal programs, that all of them will be covered by single payer legislation. We're fighting to fully fund CUNY and SUNY to make it tuition free, as it once was only decades ago. And we're fighting to end cash bail.
Yep,
and when we talk to voters, yeah, absolutely. It's critical. And when we're actually trying to end mass incarceration, we talk about closing Rikers. It's really important that we end cash bail, which is really just a war on poor people and on people of color. We know that this is a popular policy even in the state legislature, but we need elected officials who actually have the political will to pass it. Yep. And so that's what we're going to do when we win in September.
That's exactly right. What can people do? I know people have been donating to your campaign. It's an incredible fundraising number. I also know a lot of people are, if they're in the area geographically, which a fair amount of people that watch and listen to this show are. What can they do if they wanted to? First of all, how can anybody contribute money? And if somebody is able to physically and they want to, how can they go door to door for you?
Sure. So our website is salazarforsenate.com. And from there, you can learn more about the campaign, my platform, and also can sign up to volunteer or contribute. And our campaign office is open from morning to night every day, 7 days a week. And it's just stopping by anytime is a great way to get involved as well. We have canvases going out every day. One thing that's been really cool for me to witness in this campaign, especially as someone who, even though I have a background in organizing, even though I'm now a political candidate, I am sort of introverted, and I empathize with a struggle that a lot of people have expressed to me about anxiety that they have about canvassing and such. Like, we always have people to support volunteers through that. So I've been seeing a lot of people become activated in the campaign who had never previously canvassed for a political campaign. So that's a really great way to get involved, is to start canvassing. Yeah,
that is awesome. What are your feelings on Dipset?
Wow. Yeah. I'm very proud to be at the forefront of the dance revolution.
Okay, perfect. That was exactly the type of thing that I was looking for. It was very adroit, Julia. I appreciate it. Okay, Julia Salazar, thank you so much for being with us. Everybody, seriously, this one is really important. Go check out the website. We have links to it. You can also find, obviously, Julia on Twitter and elsewhere. But this is a real campaign for the things that we really need to have happen, and it needs to be hitting on all levels, federal, state, and local. This is crucial on a state level. Julia Salazar, really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me on before I was cool.
Well, I knew that would be what would happen.
Exactly.
All right. I appreciate your time. Thank you. Okay, guys. We have, I believe, do we have the music ready, Matt? I'm a big fan of this music for Griscom.
Sorry, I was going to do the Khmer Rouge theme song.
No, that's after.
That would work for me.
That would work for him as well.
Okay, yeah, I'll get
but let's stick. I like this theme we're on in Griscom's ongoing war against Richard Wolff. Yeah. Whoa, wait. Stop that. No, we don't want that. This is BBC music. This is a part of their themes. And now David Griscom, who has a vendetta and a profound desire to dislodge, next week he'll come up, a profound desire to dislodge Richard Wolff from his position. In the last planning session for the show, David said that he is going to, quote, take the old professor, cut his dick off, and shove it in his mouth. This is David Griscom, which I thought was totally inappropriate, and I don't condone in any way, shape, or form. Richard Wolff is a great man. However, you cannot stop the momentum of the young, and David Griscom's really intense commitment to get into that one Marxist economist slot. So, David Griscom, go ahead.
I guess I could never go to Manhattan again. Wolff's gonna be
David.
wandering the streets.
Richard Wolff told me he told me you're not safe above West 4th Street. All right, go ahead.
Richard Wolff said on site.
I love how this is all just a pure expression of affection for Richard Wolff, who's like a great pioneer of everything we do, and it's a passive aggressive way of getting him on the show. David, go ahead.
Yeah, so, it's been an interesting week. There was obviously was a big trade deal between Japan and the EU, which was just finalized today. But today I want to talk about some news that has sort of shook investors over the past couple of days, and that's been how the tech stocks have been doing, particularly Netflix, which saw their value drop around 15%.
Netflix in panic.
No, seriously, Netflix is in a lot of trouble. And it's because they really underperformed in the goals that they put forward. But listen, like, I'm not really here worrying too much about the purses of investors and people like this.
Indeed.
I want to look at FANG, which is Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, which
really does sound like a super villain organization.
I hadn't heard
which is
that
perfect.
before, yeah.
That works so perfectly.
Well, it's absolutely. I mean, when you
Yes.
see the acronyms that these people create, you could, like, if you had any doubts about, capitalism or like how
Right.
evil these people are, just look at their.
Or the fact that
acronyms.
the titans of today's industries were like isolated, horrible kids. Who
What were the
reading
bad
comic
guys in
books.
G.I. Joe called? Like
I forget.
Cobra.
Cobra. Yeah.
Cobra. You know that they're.
I'm
that,
sure there's a
You know,
Cobra.
Bezos was like, "Can't we make a Cobra?" Yeah.
But this is something that we really need to talk about, because FANG has actually driven most of the stock market growth over the past few years.
Right.
And when we're talking about that, we're talking about a lot of companies that don't really employ a lot of people, and they're like highly speculated industries. So you look at an organization like Facebook, that's a multi-billion-dollar organization. It only employs around 25,000 people.
Right.
You look at Amazon, which has grown to almost a status of being above governments, where you see what happened in Seattle with the city council and the small head tax that they wanted to put on. You look at what city governments are willing to provide Amazon with when it comes to tax breaks. You look at the kind of concessions that Amazon is getting from UPS, for example. These companies are really being able to operate on their own terms, and they're really bloating and consuming most of the economic growth of the United States system right now. So that's quite a worrying development for a lot of reasons, especially since most of this wealth is really being handled by a few people. We saw that Jeff Bezos, over the past 6 months, saw his valuation increase by $50 billion. I mean, to really comprehend what $50 billion in 6 months means is absolutely bizarre. But at the same time, while wealth and power is being concentrated in the hands of so few, I think that strategically this really presents an interesting opportunity for us on the left and labor organizers, because power is being concentrated in such small places. Particularly, you look at Amazon and how important these distribution centers are for
Right.
major metropolitan areas like New York City. Think about shutting those kind of distribution centers down, the kind of work that it would take to organize those workers. We're not talking about huge amounts of people like we previously would, and the kind of economic damage that Amazon could face. I was really encouraged over the week to see the strikes all across Europe, and I think that in the United States, this is really an interesting organizing opportunity that we have, while power is being so concentrated in such small areas, that we really can find these kind of pincer points in global capitalism and address them to build a better future for all.
So because those tight distribution chains, you're saying there's more pressure points for potential things like strike action.
Think how big,
which could really disrupt something like Amazon.
Amazon's a company. On Monday,
Right.
their valuation was $888 billion.
Right.
Right. And this primarily what they have done is they have just consumed the entire distribution model for
Right.
global capitalism, and they've eaten up all of their competition. So this is like a monopoly power that we're seeing right now. And because it's a monopoly power, because it's so concentrated, that means that they're very profitable and they have a lot of power when it comes to fighting governments, when it comes to avoiding taxes and all these things. But it also means that kind of concentrated strikes, concentrated actions can really be a real pain in their ass, honestly.
Yeah.
And it's just like, the thing is like global capitalism has changed so much that we have to re-strategize how we organize. But it also presents interesting weaknesses in the amount of like control and power that are sort of concentrated in a few areas. It means that you don't really have to comb all across the nation to really put a lot of hurt into these folks.
Well, it's perfect. This is David Griscom Economic Update. As always, it's a threat and a challenge to our friend and mentor, Dr. Richard Wolff, but that's just what David brings to it. All right, so that's a wrap for that. Matt Taibbi has joined us. We're going to get to him in 5 minutes. And first, I'm going to do a very special edition of the Gulag, because this is really heavy on a lot of sort of validation, which I always like. So, Matt, is the music ready? Which one are you doing on this one, by the way? Is this the Soviet one? Okay. I thought for a second you were doing BBC mashed up with Khmer Rouge, because I hear the BBC one. All right. All right, so for a long time, I haven't liked Elon Musk. I'll be the first one to admit that I don't really get it. I don't think Teslas are that amazing. And I think any kind of...
You've never driven one.
That's fair. I probably would like to drive one. But any kind of billionaire worship is a sort of innately cuckish activity. And I've always been a little disturbed by the idea that some former partner of Peter Thiel is going to save the planet. And anytime we did segments on Elon Musk talking about his labor abuses, talking about the sort of techno-utopian fantasies of his whole project and how they undermine broader efforts to really deal with something like the climate crisis, I would always get a lot of heat, including from people who are, you know, like fans or friends. And they'd be like, no, he just has a different way of thinking, but you don't understand. And in the last couple of weeks, it's almost like Elon is doing me a personal favor by being like, no, guys, Michael's totally right about me. I'm an asshole. And last week, it was the Republican campaign contribution, which alone would cancel out any benefits of a handful of Teslas rolling around Beverly Hills. And this past week, he did it in such a way that even I... Actually, you know what? I wasn't that surprised. I'm not going to lie. This is what I thought. There was some... there were 12 kids, right? Who were stuck in a cave in Thailand. I don't understand exactly how it happened. It was a fucked up story. And thank God they're safe. And Elon Musk saw them and was like, I want to get in on this. I'm going to send a submarine. And the people who were doing it were like, dude, like, thank you, but we're kind of in the middle of something here. And Elon Musk, well, should we play what the guy said first before we play the tweet? This was the guy, this is the British guy who, look, I know for people in like the Elon Musk subreddit, this guy is like human scum because he didn't found PayPal and hasn't built a flamethrower. But I think credit where credit is due. He was part of the diving team which saved these kids' lives. And this was his response to Elon Musk's attempt to insert himself into the rescue.
What are your thoughts on Elon
This is Vern
Musk's
Unsworth.
And stick his submarine where it hurts. Had absolutely no chance of working. He had no conception of what the cave passage was like. The submarine, I believe, was about 5'6" long, rigid, so it wouldn't have gone round corners or round any obstacles. It wouldn't have made the first 50 meters into the cave from the dive start point. Just a PR stunt.
But he went into the cave on Tuesday.
And was asked to leave very quickly.
It was just a PR stunt. Should be on Elon Musk's tombstone. And Elon Musk, and look, to be fair, that guy flamed him. But, you know, it's not like one of us flaming him where, you know, you could say like, oh, that's just some asshole writing an article or talking on some talk show.
Yes, we are assholes.
We are assholes, and we are just talking. But that guy literally just saved 12 kids' lives. So maybe the appropriate move would be to, you know, just take an L. We all take them from time to time. You didn't get to put your submarine in the middle of this narrative. And it's okay. There'll be more things to do. There'll be more people to worship you on social media. But Elon, who I think the bigger problem here is that the fact that he is a glorified government contractor and the fact that the company isn't actually profitable and the fact that there is like a trickle of bad stories about labor abuses and the fact that like this stuff isn't actually happening, right, in terms of it being profitable or solving big problems is starting to get to the guy's head. So he tweeted out in response to the clip we just played, you know what? Don't bother showing the video. We will make one of the MIDI sub pod going all the way to Cave 5, no problemo. Sorry, pedo guy. You really did ask for it. That's right. He just accused the diver of being a pedophile.
And then he doubles down later.
And then someone said, this guy Kevin Beaumont said, "Oh, sorry, he's calling the guy who found the children a pedo. Real classy," at Elon. And then Elon responds, "Never saw this British expat guy who lives in Thailand, sus, at any point when we were in the caves. Only people. But I bet you a signed dollar it's true. Now, there is a 99 point. Yeah, go ahead.
These tweets have since been deleted.
Right. Is it the only time that a shareholder could get through and be like, "Hey, asshole"?
His shareholders have thrown a huge fit at Elon Musk.
Oh yeah,
these tweets.
Yeah. This isn't looking great. The point where our stock is down and you're accusing a hero diver of being a pedophile. But let's game this out for a second. There is a 99.999% chance, and from all available public evidence, that this is literally, and this is the only time you'll ever hear these words coming out of my mouth. This is like literally libelous, and this guy should sue Elon Musk. And I'm not a fan of that kind of activity in any way, shape, or form for obvious reasons. But I would think, like, if this was like a law class that you could be like, this would be an example of a non-reckless lawsuit. A billionaire promoting you on a massive public platform with millions of followers being a pedophile. Or if we were going to be sympathetic to Elon Musk, and I don't know why anybody ever would, he had a team of private investigators check out all of these guys in the off chance that they wouldn't indulge his submarine fantasy. And he's sitting on evidence of a massive pedophile ring in Thailand, in which case maybe you should release the evidence instead of just sending out bitchy tweets. But I'm going to go with there is no evidence. Elon Musk is a massive asshole, and I will accept everybody's apologies. Except for his. He's sentenced to the motherfucking gulag. Okay, guys, we are gonna. You got some break music to throw on for a sec, Matt? You want to do a little more Dipset? You just play.
I want to do 3 6 Mafia, actually.
Okay, Stay Fly.
No, Red and Spinners.
Okay, that works. Fair enough. And then we'll be right back with Matt Taibbi. Thanks, everybody. Welcome back to the Michael Brooks Show. Joining us now is Matt Taibbi. Thanks so much for being here, man.
Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate you doing this.
Of course.
Writer for the Rolling Stone, author of many books. I'm sorry, I'm remiss. What's the name of the Eric Garner book?
I Can't Breathe.
I Can't Breathe, which is that's your
you
most.
Probably could have deduced that.
Could have deduced that one. Yeah.
Today is the anniversary.
Yes, that was actually just what I was just got reminded to get to you with. So it's the anniversary of his killing.
His killing, yeah, 4 years.
Where is the state of? I mean, what I actually covered last week is that Dan Donovan, who maybe you could remind everybody of in a second, is proposing legislation in Congress right now that would basically criminalize Antifa.
Oh, really?
Which, like, essentially, whatever you think of that like 15 years for wearing a face mask at a protest and intimidating somebody is one of the things in this legislation.
I wish I could say I was surprised, and the funny thing is that Dan Donovan was the second most objectionable person in that race, after Michael Grimm, who was elected to Congress while facing about 1 million years in prison and after having threatened to break a reporter in half and throw him over a balcony.
Oh, he's the dude who threatened to...
I will break you in half like a boy.
Break you like a boy while they're standing over the balcony. That's so... What I read actually was that reporter, I mean, I probably didn't read this. It's just probably totally baseless rumor mongering, but it's fun. But that reporter had like relatives like in the Bonanno family or something. So there was some like calls to like Michael Grimm being like, hey, our nephew might be soft, but you better shut the fuck up. He never threatened that, but he's a sweet boy who likes to follow politics.
That's perfect.
He'll find you in a... I really hope that's true.
Yeah, no,
I hope he got that
that's
call.
one of those news stories that I root for to be true. The funniest detail for me about the Michael Grimm story was that the whole basis of his tax case had to do with a restaurant that he had invested in the Upper East Side. That I actually went and talked to people in the neighborhood because I was going to write something about this for the book, and the only information I got was that it was the worst salads that anybody had ever made. They were $11 bad soggy salads.
Wait, but he okay. So it wasn't like a little, like they were trying to capitalize on like the sort of like fast, healthy food market.
Yeah, exactly.
Come get like an organic rosemary chicken salad
in
front of you. And
yeah.
He was just like, here's some day-old lettuce.
Yeah, exactly.
Get the fuck out.
Exactly. And the really funny thing is it's Michael Grimm behind. You know what I mean? Like a guy who wouldn't eat a salad if he was dying of hunger. You know
right.
What I mean? Yeah.
And just looks like he just oozes. No, but I like some guys like that get into like the health food scene, like, and they've got like track suits and they're just like, yeah, bee pollen, it's like really good, like will totally clean like your energy, but also like your blood.
Yeah, if you're wearing a too expensive tracksuit, I guess it's okay. That's like an exception to the rule.
Right.
Right. You can be a right wing dickwad.
Yeah,
and eat
exactly.
a salad.
And eat a salad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Michael Grimm's like, yeah, can I help you today? It's like back. There's a lot of Mulan Yangs coming in. What's going on? I'm going to call my local buddies in the precinct. But I mean, you want to? I mean, talk about it. I think you should remind everybody all the time of Eric Garner. I mean, you want to talk about that case?
Yeah, I mean, it was
bit.
a crazy case. I spent 2.5 years of my life researching it. The real essence of it was, I mean, the most surprising fact that I learned was really early on, which was that Eric Garner wasn't even selling untaxed cigarettes that day. So if you go back and look
the core story of that narrative's wrong.
Yeah, it's completely wrong. And it was a classic example of what happens in the internet age when we try to do news stories that are viral, right? So an error gets out on the internet, on Twitter, and it just gets repeated often enough that it just becomes part of the story before anybody can catch up to it. And so even today, if you go back and look at the news stories about what happened, what you'll get is some version that says Eric Garner was involved in a altercation while resisting arrest for selling untaxed cigarettes. Actually, the story was a lot weirder and more disturbing than that. Garner, of course, did sell untaxed cigarettes for a living. That's what he did. Right. And he did it every day of his life, and he had been repeatedly busted for it. But on that particular day, first of all, he'd had an argument the night before because he had turned somebody in or called the cops on somebody, and so people in the neighborhood were upset about that. There was a dispute over whether that was snitching or not.
Right.
So he came in and he was sort of trying to clear that up with some people in the neighborhood, like, it wasn't, like this, that, and the other thing happened. Then he got sick, and he went and he spent like 2 hours in the bathroom in basically a welfare office across the street. Came out, broke up a fight, because that was one of the things that he did there. He was a big guy, and they wanted to keep cops out of the neighborhood, and fights were bad for the neighborhood. So a fight broke out. He breaks it up. He's winded. He leans up against the wall, and then these two cops come over, and they're like, "Come, you're coming with us." And that's the genesis of this story. And the back story there is that some lieutenant drove by the neighborhood earlier that day, saw Garner standing on the corner, and had probably gotten an earful at the Comstat meetings. You know what those are? Like, you ever watch The Wire?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they still have those. These are these things where, like, the senior police officers get shown pictures of their neighborhoods, and the higher ranking guys, like, yell at you, like, look at all these fucking people on the streets. Can you clear that up?
Yeah.
So Garner was a very conspicuous guy. Somebody had gotten an earful about Garner. They drive by the neighborhood. They see him on the corner, and they tell these two meathead detectives who are sitting around the precinct, "Hey, go pick him up." And so that's how this whole thing got started. It didn't even have any, like, selling untaxed cigarettes isn't even a misdemeanor.
Right.
Right? It's a ticket. But he wasn't even doing that. He was literally just leaning up against a wall. And there's so much in that's wrong and bizarre, starting with the whole statistical imperative. Like, that's why all this stuff happens. That's why we have so many more of these incidents that are necessary. But it was just a classically terrible, avoidable situation.
There was this piece that I read that came out a little bit after Garner. I forget who wrote it, but there was also a case in Louisiana where a guy was killed by cops. And in that case, he was selling,
I think it was
like
CDs,
DVDs or something like that out of his trunk. And the frame of the piece, it was called, I remember the title, it was called "Knocking the Hustle" because of the Jay-Z song. And it was just like a contrast of, like, essentially what these guys are doing is they're doing like poor and urban versions of like Airbnb style disruptions.
Right.
Like, they're looking for little micro areas in an economy where there's an open lane, and they're
It's an arbitrage.
They're doing arbitrage, right? And then in this case, and then of course, instead of getting honored for innovation, they're killed.
Right, exactly.
But like,
exactly,
it's literally the same thing, just in a different racial and economic context, which explains all of it.
Garner basically did the same thing for a living that Ivan Boesky did. He just did it on a smaller scale. I mean,
and probably broke up more fights and helped more people.
right.
Yeah, let's be real. Yeah. It was like an altogether better human being in every way, shape, and form.
Yeah, I mean, he had his foibles, but at this point in his life, he had really chilled out a lot. He was much more of a family man. In his youth, he sold crack, and he was a bit of a hustler, but he didn't really have the heart for it. Like that was one of the consistent details that I got from people on the street, was that Garner really, he started off in the drug dealing business, and it just never really had the gumption to stick with it. He took days off. Like that was one of the things.
He took days off. I like that.
Yeah, like I had one person tell me, like, Eric, man, he took days off.
He wasn't a go-getter.
Like holidays, like on Halloween, he would like spend it with his family. Yeah. Guys would be like, you can't turn your pager off, dude. And so that's who he was. He was kind of in it for the money. He got in trouble. He had gotten a very bad fight when he was younger and went to prison for that. And then he just had consistently awful luck, and the cops, because he was so big and so conspicuous, they just constantly picked on him.
And none of those stories need to be dependent. Like, what I also really hate is it's just like, that illustrates it too, right? Like, somebody doesn't have to be a saint and wronged. Like, you can be basically the same sort of mediocre bag that basically we all are,
right?
But you're in a context where that means you're involved with more shit by definition,
right?
And none of these it was, I mean, that was Giuliani's whole tactic, right? It was like the NYPD just murdered an innocent person. Well, what's the guy's case file?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Totally irrelevant. And by the way, it'd even be irrelevant if we actually discovered that somebody was like a real dirtbag,
right?
Like an actually genuinely bad person. It's irrelevant.
Yeah,
they got caught up in something. It's all it has, totally secondary.
Yeah, no, that's the first thing they do is they go searching through the file, and they have favorite reporters that they call up, and they say, this is what happened during the interrogations in previous sessions. Like, Ramsey Orta, who's the guy who filmed the Garner incident, he got this more than Garner did. Garner had a really clean rep on the street. He was considered a really nice guy. All the store owners liked him. But the guy who filmed the episode, Ramsey Orta, had a worse rep, and the cops were completely blamed the whole thing on him, even though it could have been Mary Poppins sitting there that day. You know what I mean? It had nothing to do with anything that he was the guy with the camera that day. But they were constantly calling reporters and talking about what happened with him, and they went out of their way to build cases on him. They had a sting involving him. I mean, it was, and he's in jail now. He's the only person in that whole tableau who's now currently in jail. And it was, I would say that it was.
So the guy who exposed what I would call a murder, I don't know any other word to say it. I mean, I'll editorialize that. The guy who literally filmed and made it available. I mean, I remember that case was so blatant. Just the visual, like setting aside everything else, like the propaganda of certain people, your important reporting, the visual of that. George W. Bush, if I remember correctly, saw that and was like, yeah, it looked pretty bad. And the only one who goes to jail is the guy who showed that.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it was amazing. And the thing about Ramsey going to jail, and I got to know him pretty well, and he look, Ramsey was a drug dealer. He had some issues. He was a little bit of a scary dude on the street. He doesn't even shy away from that. That's like who he was. But the police, when they finally brought him in, one of the first things they said to him was they took a picture of him as he was getting arrested, and they're like, "You took a picture. Now we're taking the picture," right? Like, like it's a 1-to-1 thing, and they just never were able to get to the place where they understood what had happened and were not able to blame it on somebody else.
The only other thing I want to touch on, which is also, I mean, I feel like maybe it's somewhat inspiring because what she did while she was here was amazing. But maybe just talk about his daughter.
Oh, Erica.
Yeah.
That was so sad. I mean, I got to know Erica pretty early in the process. I had gone out there a few times to talk to people about who Eric Garner was, and he just seemed like a really interesting person to me. And I thought, well, maybe I'll write a book about this, but I can't really do it without the family. So I called her up and we met. And I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm not going to be able to just sort of depict him as a saint. I'm going to have to say whatever I learn. And she's like, I don't want that. I want people to know exactly who he was.
Because he was a real person.
Right, exactly. And she actually insisted on it that way. She's like, if I find out that you're leaving things out, I'm going to be upset. And then, when I met her was just when she was sort of starting to be kind of an activist, and it was sort of thrust upon her because, the Sharpton family Sharpton was talking for the family originally, and she kind of became disillusioned with that whole situation and started feeling like she had to do all the talking herself, and she started leading these protests. And she turned out to be really good at it. I mean, like some people.
Yeah, she was really talented.
Yeah,
very articulate, charismatic person.
Charismatic.
Yeah.
She was able to command a crowd. She felt like the responsibility very keenly and went after it. Didn't turn people away. She took brave stands on things, like the whole business about supporting Sanders was. She got a lot of flack for that, but that was just her sitting and thinking, like, on her own. And it was the thing about her dying was just so horrible and unexpected. So it's that was a really sad story.
Yeah, but that's fucking depressing. I don't know the elegant transition out of it, but it's really
exactly.
important.
What do we do now?
Yeah. I mean, basically. The cheap one is there were many sides. A lot of things happening. Many people. Oh, actually, here's the transition. I'm sure you don't remember this, but I want to apologize to you. Because you called in. We were covering this election night. And I didn't even dig up the Abiki Bar thing because I just can't. It's just too much. But and I was reminded, have you seen Sacred Games yet on Netflix?
No.
It's a good show. It's actually a great novel. It's about basically it's an Indian gangster story, but it's really about the rise of Hindu far-right nationalism in India. Cool. And during it's really interesting. And during the campaign, Trump did this like ultra low budget Indian ad where he was like, Abiki Bar, Trump, Sakar. And then it literally was like,
wait, I remember this.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
So what happened was during election night, and I think in retrospect, this is a little self-justifying, but it is true. My head and my gut were completely disconnected. Like my head was like, yeah, Hillary's going to win this. But I never exactly felt that. And I did this, I don't usually talk about this stuff publicly, but I did do a couple of weeks before the election. I did an ayahuasca thing, which was really intense and really bad. And actually, I realized in retrospect was like the perfect precursor for the election. I was like, oh, okay. But anyways, it was election night, and Sam and me and the team, and I was very much just in the mode of like, Hillary's going to be president. And you called in, and you were like, basically saying like, I don't know, guys, like I get that the numbers look good, but like, I've been out in the country, and I see a storm cloud, and I just remember being like, I was probably a little tipsy, and I was just like, dude, don't even worry about it. Hillary's got this. Did you see that Indian ad? Did you see the Trump Indian ad? Can we play that for him? And Sam's like, oh, yeah, we should play that. And then we played this stupid ad and actually got you to be like, oh, that's pretty funny. And I just remember being like, what a fucking asshole I am. Like, Matt was totally right about this. And I'm just like...
I mean, it was funny.
It was a very funny ad.
Yeah,
this is
it was
true.
a very funny ad. No, actually, I remember that because What I remember is that I called in and I was almost certain Hillary was going to win, and then in the middle of the show is when we figured
the
out
bad news started coming in.
Yeah, like Florida happened while I was on the phone with you guys, right?
Yeah, you're right. I think Florida, in my mind,
and that prompted this conversation. Right?
Yes, and I was totally in denial, and I think in my mind I was like, I always thought, like, if one of these places, like, if it's actually going to happen, it's going to be Florida.
Yeah.
And then she'll win the rest. I mean, if Florida's crazy.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. It's like my father always said, like, if it weren't for Florida and Texas, there wouldn't be television magazine shows.
Right.
That's where every fucked up thing happens.
Yeah. So it's whatever. Some guys like fucking wrestling a gator, like literally. Oh, you want to defend Texas's honor?
Well, I'm
go ahead.
I'm a Texan. My little brother and sister are from Florida. So.
Nice. Dude, your family just got wrecked by Matt Taibbi.
by my father. I was just conveying.
Yeah, by his dad.
It's in the blood.
Yeah. What did you say?
It's in the blood.
It's in the blood. Anyways, I don't know if we have that. Yeah, don't worry about finding it if it's hard to find.
The ad,
yeah. Habiki bar, Trump, and it was so amazing because it was like they didn't even cut, like they didn't even bother to like sort of make it obvious that it wasn't totally cut up because it clearly, like after 5 minutes, he's like, I can't pronounce this, whatever, I don't care. Oh, we got it.
Last take.
All right, let's just do this. What the hell? This time, Trump government. Oh my God.
Oh, it looks like it's a bit clipped up, but we'll get the bit just a bit. You're going to it now, David.
Yeah.
Habiki bar, Trump, Sarkar.
Oh man, wait, one more time. Can I hear that?
Oh yeah, you want to slow it up? Do some.
I'm gonna make this my ringtone.
Yeah, this would be a great ringtone. Oh my God.
Habiki bar, Trump, Sarkar.
You gotta look for the cut.
Habiki bar, Trump, Sarkar.
So that's me 3 hours before we elect like the most overt white supremacist in modern history. Like, don't worry about it. He's fucking smoking indie, dude. It's fine. It's hilarious. No, we did. It was a YouTube clip. You should watch it.
Well, I mean, what could you do but laugh about it, right? But then it's suddenly like nothing was funny after that.
No, I got sick.
The moment
Really?
I remember nothing. I remember
Yeah.
the moment I'm like, oh shit! If she loses Wisconsin, then too. I can't remember what happened, but I'm like, oh, if she loses Wisconsin, then too, it's a wrap. And just not. I haven't felt the same since that moment.
No, I haven't either.
Yeah,
but it really was like it was one of those like in a sick positive way. It definitely was one of those like whatever petty shit you've got going on. It was very clarifying. Like, don't continue whatever dumb argument you're involved with or whatever, or like tell your parents you love them. Like, cut the bullshit. Show up as a human being. Now things are pretty serious. I mean, they were before, which is the trick of it, but it's gotten really heightened. Well, let's play these clips from today because I do need to run this Russia stuff by you. I really, honestly, the only precursor I'll give you is it seems to me, my read has always been there's something going on, but it's more of like a money laundering mafia story than a sort of Manchurian candidate story. Democrats and resistance types have gone so overboard with it,
right?
But now I almost feel like people more in our zone got too like, oh, like Russia, that's not cool. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, no, actually, there is something that seems pretty fucking weird. And let's play these. Oh, you crashed? So we need a sec. But basically, we're going to play these clips in a second. First, we'll play the one from yesterday with Putin, where he's asked the question by the AP reporter essentially about does he accept the U.S. intelligence over Russia's denials? And then we'll get to his. Just to be fair, before we play this, Trump totally clarified this today, so it's a little bit unfair to play this.
Well, no, I
no,
mean,
I'm totally joking.
Yeah. His clarification.
No, I'm being really facetious. His clarification did not.
But even by Trumpian standards, it was particularly unconvincing.
It was even by Trumpian standards. I honestly couldn't even fully understand what he was trying to lie about.
Right.
I understood it was a lie, but I didn't get it.
Right.
But let's play the one from yesterday and then the thing he put out today.
The question. My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be, but I really do want to see the server.
That's, of course, Hillary Clinton's server. He does stay on point with that message. And this is Trump. So if you're listening, you understood him. He basically just said, it's getting annoying to me. This does not require any faith or belief or sentiment around the United States intelligence community. But just for a second, like if any other head of state was like in a press conference, say with, this wouldn't happen, but let's do hypothetical. Say there's some type of rapprochement with Venezuela and Trump is standing next to Maduro. And they're like, hey, President Maduro, your military and intelligence services say the United States have been trying to basically instigate a coup against you and against your predecessor. And then Maduro's like, well, yeah, they say that, but Trump is saying that that's totally not true. And he seems pretty convincing to me. So that's literally what just that happened. And this is, which is honestly is objectively pretty crazy. And this is Trump, what he said today to supposedly clarify this. And I honestly don't understand what he's saying here.
I thought that I made myself very clear by having just reviewed the transcript. Now, I have to say, I came back and I said, what is going on? What's the big deal? So I got a transcript. I reviewed it. I actually went out and reviewed a clip of an answer that I gave. And I realized that there is a need for some clarification. It should have been obvious. I thought it would be obvious, but I would like to clarify just in case it wasn't. In a key sentence in my remarks, I said the word would instead of wouldn't. The sentence should have been, I don't see any reason why I wouldn't, or why it wouldn't be Russia. So, just to repeat it, I said the word would instead of wouldn't. And the sentence should have been, and I thought it would be maybe a little bit unclear on the transcript or unclear on the actual video. The sentence should have been, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be Russia. Sort of a double negative. So you can put that in, and I think that probably clarifies things pretty good by itself.
Yo,
Trump.
It probably clarifies this pretty good by itself. Yes. Yo. All right.
No, I love Trump replacing William Safire as the grammar expert of our time. Sort of a double negative. Yeah.
In a certain sense.
Well, it's technically a single negative.
Right.
Why it
well, no, it's a double negative.
Why it would not be Russia?
I don't see why it wouldn't.
What? Is that a single or double?
It's two negatives in there.
Why it would not?
I don't.
Oh, I don't. I forgot. You're right.
Yeah.
But I was right.
Don't embarrass me on my show. Yeah, exactly. That's the Trump. Exactly. Just like mistake. I said. Nailed it.
Trump's going to tweet about that tomorrow.
A lot of people saying it wasn't a double negative. Total lie.
Sad.
Sad. What was the bit? I like the best tweet. We got to get your analysis of this. But I remember the tweet he did the other day where he's just like, "What a joke!" Like, and we were like Russia collaboration. What a joke! Where you just like, yeah, it's like all these hilarious routines about me wanting to fuck my daughter, having mafia connections, all of these jokes. Honestly, what the hell's going on? I mean, do you have any any read whatsoever on this from either a Russia or a Trump perspective? Like it is really confusing.
I mean, this whole story has been difficult for me. Do you watch the show House? You ever watch that show?
With the doctor?
I've seen about 3 seasons.
I've seen not a little. I know what you're talking about.
Okay, so I used to I love that show, but my wife can't watch it because she's a doctor and the medicine's all wrong. Right. And so she can't get into the story because like none of the dialogue really fits. And having lived in Russia for 20 years, a lot of the for 12 years. A lot of the stuff that has come up in the course of this.
Matt, is my board up? You said 20 years? Or 12 years?
12 years. 12 years.
Oh, shit. There's a whole other thread here that we haven't explored before. Yeah.
But the whole thing about, Trump himself, back in January of 2017, said, I think it was Russia. And the notion that it was them, there's never really been a solid hypothesis for who else it really could have been. There's the Seth Rich theory, but that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
And from the beginning, I thought that it wouldn't be surprising if it were Putin, and it's. I think in what happened yesterday was a situation where Trump. He's just so classically, he's so insecure that when he's around somebody he thinks is more of an alpha than he is, he turtles every single time, and that's not terribly often. I think one of the things you saw in the in the Republican presidential primary is that he didn't feel that way about anybody in the race. And
nor should he have.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. But when he's around Putin, he clearly worships and admires the guy, and that's pathetic. And it came through that he wasn't able to say the thing that probably his entire staff was just screaming for him to just shut up and say, or not say, in that situation. And that, you can interpret that a lot of different ways. People are, a lot of people are saying that that's evidence that he's bought off. To me, I don't know. It was a terrible, terrible look. I don't know if it's treason, but it was. It was certainly one of the lower moments in the history of our foreign policy. That's for sure.
You think it's it doesn't seem, setting aside the whole P-tape thing, which of course I believe because it's fun to believe, but it seems to me on a really basic level, and you would know this, be house here because I don't know Russia like you know Russia at all, but it seems to me okay. You got a guy who's coming there who has some type of profile in the United States, even if it's a clownish entertainment profile. It wouldn't be shocking at all to me. It seems to me, and not just in Russia, in any number of places that have more sort of that they might keep tabs on what the guy was up to while he was there.
They not only there's not only speculation that they do that we absolutely know concretely that they. I was in Russia in the late 90s watching on live television when Putin was first brought into the Yeltsin White House. And one of the first things they did was they had to destroy politically this guy named Yuri Skaratov, who was the general prosecutor at the time.
Sounds like a guy that's important to destroy.
Yeah, he was.
Gotta get rid of that guy.
He was going after sort of Yeltsin family corruption and wanted to make a big stink about it. So they
not good.
They taped him cavorting with prostitutes, and then they put it on television. And Skaratov was not. That was a man's body that you did not want to see on TV.
So a lot of Trump. So there is the Trump parallel.
No, but they absolutely do that. They did. There was another incident involving a guy named Kasyanov. There's this whole idea of compromise is not a new one. Every prominent Western businessman who comes to Russia has to come with the expectation, especially longer ago, I would say, but probably still to this day. You come with the expectation that you're going to be monitored in some way.
You guys should think about
Wasn't that the weird thing about, the funny thing, maybe revealing thing about Putin's response was there was all sorts of businessmen there. How would I know Trump was even there? Well, isn't that the sly thing he's saying? We have blackmail material on lots and lots.
Yeah, there's any number of people who should be worried about what we. But
I think I know who he's talking about there. But there's. Yeah, absolutely. He was sending a message probably to the entire expat community that any prominent person who's involved with any kind of deal over there can expect that there's going to be some kind of activity. But
even I'm just saying, even regardless of the fun stuff, it's like, okay, it would be shocking if Trump. I mean, it's another thing that seems pretty close to confirm that Trump's involved in money laundering. I'm just saying, like, whatever it is, they have something on him. Right? I mean,
probably
something.
So this is another thing where this is another,
and it
like,
doesn't contradict the alpha male deference scenario either.
Right? Yeah.
What's the house thing?
So, like, to Russians, one of the reasons, like, Trump is probably the only extremely corrupt, famous international businessman who doesn't have a hotel in Moscow.
Right.
And the reason for that is that he's not really rich.
Right.
To the Russians, you have to remember the people who became wealthy in Russia in the 90s, who became oligarchs. They have money on a scale that
they're multi-billionaires.
Yeah, like
they're not messing around.
They blow away. I mean, they're on the level of the Microsoft, Jeff Bezos. I mean, they have fuck you money. They have real money, and they saw in the 90s and the early 2000s this parade of Americans coming over, basically, with their hands out looking for cash. And Trump was one of those people. He was consistently looking for a hotel deal, and what he really wanted was Russian money that they would pay, where they would pay basically for the privilege of putting the Trump name on some downtrodden property like the godforsaken Hotel Russia, which was once the world's biggest hotel. It was right next to the Kremlin. I'm sorry, to Red Square, and they couldn't give him that deal. So
he was like, they think he's a total joke.
They think he's but to that point, the much more plausible scenario, and this is why when I read I'm blanking. Who's the guy who wrote the book from inside the White House?
Richard Wolff.
Wolff, yeah, exactly.
No, not
Wolff. Yeah, Michael Wolff. Yeah.
I need to stop making those jokes about you having edible conflicts with Richard Wolff, David. My bad. All right, Michael Wolff wrote that book.
Yeah, Michael Wolff wrote that book, and one of the things is one of the scenes that actually rings true in that book, and a lot of it doesn't. But it's the part where the Mueller brings on money laundering investigators,
right?
And Bannon is going nuts. He's
Bannon's like, "This is it. This is what they're going to get."
It's all about money laundering.
Right.
That makes perfect sense because Trump's utility to the kind of people who have money in Russia,
like washing money through apartments.
Washing money. Yeah. I mean, like, look at how many money laundering scandals there have been that have involved Russian cash, because there's so much of it flying out of the country. Like the Bank of New York scandal in the 90s. There was tons and tons and tons of money that was being ripped off, stolen, expropriated, and it had to find a home somewhere. And so that is where somebody like Trump, at least in my mind, would more naturally fit in. I wouldn't have thought that they would think of him as anything more than that up until this shocking coming out party as a serious politician.
Well, it makes total sense. I guess the other thing is, I mean, as I say, I'm looking at this NRA stuff and the arrests that happened today, and I just haven't paid much attention to it. But it's like, that story actually makes it look like if that line is true and the charges are accurate, then that they were basically like, I mean, that money could have gone to benefit any Republican nominee. That, like, the real game plan was like, for whatever reason, we really don't like Hillary Clinton and we just want to switch up, which is seems a little, I mean, on its face, it does seem a little odd because, I mean, certainly besides Trump, all the rest of the Republican candidates were super, hawkish and intense about Russia. But,
yeah. So there's another little thing where the sort of gun nut people in Russia have a different profile than they do in the United States. It's not so completely associated with the right wing in the same way it is here. A lot of the people who are sort of right to bear arms people in Russia are actually considered progressives, like Putin herself. Actually, she was actually supported by Alexander Navalny, who's the big human rights advocate.
Oh, that's really interesting.
When she ran for office. You have to remember that in Soviet times guns were banned.
Right.
And nobody had them, and so the idea of gun control laws to them just has a completely different meaning.
Or maybe not even, but they're just legit.
Right,
like when people hear just like, if they take it away, like Obama's gonna make my daughter be a black Muslim,
right? Yeah,
and they're like, no, literally,
yeah,
they took away our guns and we couldn't like protect ourselves from a more overarching state.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, like that actually happened.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I was there when there were no guns, and you know, literally, it wasn't even an idea in anybody's head at that time. You know,
right.
So they went from that to having 5,000 murders a year, like, you know, in Moscow, like almost overnight.
It's a big number.
Yeah.
Big number.
Yeah.
This thing is so fucked up about Trump. So you could just insert anything. Big number, I'll tell you. Matt, go ahead.
So just to clarify, that they introduced gun rights and then the murders just skyrocketed?
Well, they didn't exactly introduce the rights. Guns more sort of just appeared first.
Yeah, was it just private? Like I'm thinking of like gangs and private security for oligarchs just start getting heavy artillery.
Well, yeah, there was that. There was lifting guns off of military bases. Like, you know, there was a period there where it was basically almost complete chaos in Russia for 8 or 9 years, right? And suddenly people had guns, and where they got them, they didn't get them in like licensed gun shops. They just sort of happened, you know. And it was a situation where the control over that sort of thing just completely disappeared.
So, and that's also at the time when people like Jeffrey Sachs are there privatizing and doing shock therapy on the economy.
Yeah, and this is where we get into the whole thing that I've been like trying not to say because I'm going to get 1,000 people screaming about whataboutism. But
I love it. It's on TMBS. Let's do it. We've got some whataboutism, and I'm ready.
So yeah, that was the whole like privatization effort in the early 90s, and this is when we sort of hugely openly meddled in the 1996 presidential election in this way that was, I was there for this. It was incredible. So Yeltsin was at 7% at the polls at the beginning of the process. Wow. He was going to lose to this guy Gennady Zyuganov, who's maybe the dumbest person on earth. He was
the guy head of the Communist Party.
He was the head of the Communist Party. He was the kind of person you ask him a question and he would like literally touch his lip and go like that, like he had to think for the answer. Anyway, that guy was creaming Yeltsin in the polls, and Yeltsin was like a walking corpse at that time. He was pickled, and and so we were desperate because we didn't want Russia to go back into the hands of communists. Right. So this sort of grand bargain was cooked up, where they sped up the privatization effort, and they created this series of auctions called the Loans for Shares auctions, where they essentially just handed over companies the size of ExxonMobil to a handful of people, like 8 or 9 people. The state even lent them the money to bid in the auctions, and then this group of people who were instantly enriched got together, and they agreed to finance Yeltsin's re-election campaign. They brought in American advisors.
And they brought the American political consultants.
Yeah, who had an office in the Kremlin, who were reporting regularly back to Clinton. And so it's not just that we advised and helped make a few commercials. We fundamentally reordered the Russian economy in order to prevent this election from happening. And the consequence of that was that we created all these oligarchs who we're now talking about, like people like Oleg Deripaska, who play a central role in the Russiagate story. They were nobodies before this series of events, and so we're now kind of dealing with the fallout from that. And
so what you're saying is that what about 1996?
What I'm saying.
No, I don't understand the distinction between, like, I get that some people like concern troll and kind of bullshit, and they can't hold multiple truths in their head at once, and that's really irritating. But I don't understand how people expect to be able to have a conversation about what's happening without dealing with the history.
Like 20 years ago is ancient history.
Yeah, it's like, no, this is happening. It's living history. So the charge of like a contextual understanding of what is driving something as whataboutism is not only like bad faith. It's fundamentally dangerous to figuring anything out and righting any fundamental wrongs in a very practical sense, because it's biting us now.
And I don't say this in order to justify what Russia did. I was actually shocked that they went as far as they did. It's kind of not in their normally they would do it in a much more stealth manner. I would have thought. They have done things like this before, but just never on this scale. But a lot of this is still it's residual hostility over the shame that a lot of Russians felt about what happened in the 90s and the early 2000s, and there's a lot of like desire for payback that's good that's in that class of people. That doesn't make it legitimate. It's just by way of explaining. It's the context. Yeah.
What really quick? I'm preparing. I do for patrons of the show. Part of the specific content they get is our illicit histories on things like, CIA destabilization in Jamaica. Working on one on Haiti. We just did actually a dissection of Steve Pinker. A lot of different topics, and one I'm researching right now is on Gerhard Schroeder and Joschka Fischer's political partnership and how it sort of ended in them basically lobbying for different oil pipelines. Mm-hmm. Now, what I'm really interested in is Gerhard Schroeder, who was the Chancellor of Germany, I think, from 98 to 2005, and was a Social Democratic Party leader. He is super tight with Putin. Mm-hmm. In a very overt way. Like, this isn't speculative. He's literally like on board of what is some major Russian energy conglomerate.
Gazprom, I think.
Yeah, I think. And so I'm like, is he the prototype of, basically like, I guess it's like of Russian sort of interest in cultivating Western politicians, even though I know Germany fits in a different way in their relationship with Russia. And also, it's just interesting to me when you look at that story, because in some ways it's like, it demystifies all of like Russia shit, and it gets you more into like, if you have multi-billionaires and oil money, you can basically corrupt anybody. Like, this isn't like a special Russia thing. Well, that's like the story of how the world works right now with unbridled markets.
Absolutely, and that's Russia. Russia has always had an inferiority complex when it comes to Europe, and their way in. Their way of exerting some kind of control or pressure over Europe is the natural gas situation. I mean, they want that pipeline so badly because they want Europe basically to be dependent on cheap resources that come from Russia. That's like a key to their whole geopolitical strategy. I mean that's what Russia's trying to do. The Schroeder's close relationship to Putin isn't surprising. Putin speaks fluent German. If you've ever seen a video of Putin speaking German, it's terrifying. Like he actually had a speech that he gave to the Reichstag where like you could see the people in the crowd trying not to do the.
It's like old habits die hard, man.
Yeah, exactly.
This guy's got it. I don't know what it is, but he's got that fucking. Yeah. What we did to the Jews is terrible. It's terrible. That shit was great.
The daydream I had every once in a while, and it would probably be more pronounced if like Russia didn't seem to be mainly helping the Republicans. But what if Putin was like, actually, we've been communists this whole time. This entire thing with the oligarchs is just to discredit capitalism. Welcome home, everybody.
It was big. We were just play acting. Well, that was the point.
I mean, that's part of their strategy too. I mean, the Russians are definitely trying to play up all of the weaknesses of Western style capitalism, and one of the reasons they're doing that is because they have a huge feeling of resentment about Jeffrey Stack's style policies, and even though they're absolutely the worst kind of capitalist society right now. I mean,
they're a Republican dreamscape.
Yeah,
it's like right wing oil, like petro state, like.
There's 4 people with money. Right. Everybody else is like literally fighting, manual combat over like subsistence farming resources, and that's like Russia.
Unless they're Instagram models.
Exactly.
They have figured out exactly. There's 4 people with money. The rest of the people physically fight each other, and then there's Instagram models. Amazing. That's what we're trying to create here. And meanwhile, while this is happening, China's just like, yeah, you guys should figure that shit out. While we literally rise.
Pave Africa.
Right. We are literally paving Africa. So we alluded to it before because in the last segment before we go to the post game, let's touch on this. You have a new piece out called "The Mythical Center Isn't Sexy," and I saw this headline and I was like, I mean, to be blunt with you, I'm a big fan of your writing. I have been like since college. It's a little while now. But I thought to myself, like, what the fuck is happening with this dude's title? Like, I agree with the sentiment, but I don't, like, what's going on here? And then I realized, and of course my faith was fully restored in you and also my lack of faith in the New York Times. You were responding to a piece called "The Center is Sexier Than You Think." Written by one Frank Bruni.
You can only ever have this about extractions. Like if an article came out like this person's sexy, and then you came out with an article saying that person's not sexy, it'd be a problem.
That would actually be hilarious. It's like, actually, no. Totally disagree. What was Frank Bruni arguing in this? Like, I mean, the fact that people. The last tangent I'll go on. I remember several months ago. Remember how Bill Clinton had a column for the New York Times? He had.
I didn't even see it. What did he say?
It was literally something.
I'm not hiding from Me Too.
Oh no, it was pre-Me Too. It was literally like, if you change some of the words, it almost was like, there are divisions, but there is also an AOL-enabled information superhighway. Like it was just like a column, like from 1995.
That sounds like Tom Friedman.
Yeah, no, it was. Well, yeah, Bill Clinton was the Tom Friedman president, right? Like it was just totally like, while there are many that will question our progress, more and more of us are coming together in a shared common goals. Like it was just, it's like, and so. I guess my point being that I went and actually read the Frank Bruni piece, which you're about to tear apart, and it really read like, dude, like, it made me respect hysterical liberals a lot more because at least they're like historically like at least they're like, I'm freaked out,
right?
And this guy was just like, you know what can't be solved by a little bit of people just having a cup of coffee together and throwing old people off of Social Security and. You know, a few more people watch Queer Eye. Maybe we could roll our sleeves up and get some goddamn things done in this country.
And it will be exciting.
And it will be exciting. The balls on top of that to be like, I mean, at least with Thomas Friedman, I remember like Thomas Friedman was like, you're right. This will be exciting for all of the massive amount of people whose jobs and livelihood you'll destroy. I guess that is true.
Also, Thomas Friedman's columns were exciting because the imagery was. Like it was a thrill. It was like watching a Terry Gilliam animation, like trying to figure out, you know. But Frank Bruni is like he's the most boring writer on the planet.
He's a basic guy.
Yeah.
So what's he arguing here, and what was your response?
So
to
this is just a response to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez,
right?
Because she's exciting now.
She's
right?
exciting now.
And in the parlance of the media, she's sexy. It's the sexy story, right? And he's responding. So first they started by saying it wasn't a big deal that she won, right? Then it was only one election. Then it was she won because of identity politics. Then it was she won because she was a local. And now the new line is what happened in the Bronx wasn't exciting. What's really exciting is what we've been doing over and over again for the last 35, 40 years, and which has left us in a historically futile political position, losing over 1,000 seats over 10 years. I mean, like that's the excitement, because the core of the argument is you have to win to be exciting, and what we do wins, and yeah.
So basically,
murmur.
So basically, it's like, yeah, fuck all that shit. there's some polling data that Third Way put out in 2007. That's what it is. Yeah, she's cool. She was all right. Yeah. But look, that's Puerto Rican chick in a Puerto Rican district. What it really is there's this DLC sub poll that came out in 2001 before a lot of you even hit puberty yet. That shit is lit.
That is essentially the argument.
Okay. So that's the bigger media question is like, even from a cynical perspective, how does this still exist?
I spent a lot of 2016 talking to political consultants, and it's just striking how they just don't get where the electorate is at. Like they're still in this place where they think the way to win elections is say as little as possible, and go for independence by affecting some combination of pro-militarism and like enthusiasm for international capitalism, with maybe gay rights or something like that.
Right.
And we're gonna
give a little, get a little.
Exactly.
Destroy the planet, but don't be rude to your friend's gay friend, your son's gay friend.
Exactly.
That's how it works. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
And so they still believe that that's the formula. Whereas if you go out and actually talk to people, the overwhelming emotion among everybody on both sides of the aisle, starting 3 or 4 years ago, was, I fucking hate everybody in Washington. I will vote for anybody who isn't a politician, right? Like that's where their heads are at right now. And so, and what they want is they want big sweeping ideas. They want something concrete. They don't want a promise that's going to come to pass 15, 20 years from now. They want it this term, right?
Right.
And so, like ideas like Medicare for all, which may have been difficult to sell electorally 15 years ago. Now that's where people are at because they want something, right? They're tired of waiting, you know. And this class of politicians and consultants in Washington who are advising Democratic politicians, they're stuck on that point. I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
Is it a capitalism? I guess my kind of basic theory is twofold. One is like, first of all, independence as a category is crazy because my read of, and people, you would know better than me, but my read of the electorate is like, first of all, okay, some people that call themselves independents are obviously just, they don't want the brand of whatever their party is.
Right.
So they're independents, like the people like, hi, I'm calling on the independent line, and I want to say that Obama is a communist Muslim, and I don't think we should be having a guy who blows men in cars and wants to turn us into a Shia state as president. And I say that as an independent.
That
right?
Is a
like
type.
that's a type. And then I think to the extent that there actually is literally like potentially people who are somehow in between, it's the complete opposite, which is that they're probably, I would assume, to the right of me on so-called social issues and totally in line with a lot of where people like us are coming from in terms of Wall Street, Medicare for all, fuck businesses, like that. So, and then it's like, well, okay, so why is there this constant attention on slash benefits, but like, I wouldn't even say be progressive on social issues. I would say just don't even be totally retrograde, like Morning Joe politics.
Right.
And then it starts to seem like, well, yeah, because that reflects the top 4% of the population with a completely inordinate cultural and economic influence.
Right. Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
I guess that's what it is. And they just want to keep recycling back to themselves their dead, discredited ideas.
That's right. That's
I
right.
mean,
Well,
but,
I mean, that when the electorate only had two choices, once upon a time there was like the mainstream Democratic idea, and there was a mainstream Republican idea, and they were both essentially like employer-funded parties, right? But they were very different on social issues, but on a lot of other things they were similar, like trade and financial deregulation and stuff like that. People basically went along and said, okay, well, I'll pick between one of these two brands, and that's fine. And then it suddenly became a thing where people were like, no, I'm not going to vote for one of those choices anymore.
Right.
I'm going to pick something else, and even if it's crazy, and
it's really crazy.
Yeah, and that was and now, that now it's led to this thing where nobody wants to vote for that 4% of people and what they stand for, because they just feel like they've been voting for somebody else's ideas for years.
Right, but it just still has all this legacy power.
Right.
Like, it's funny. Like, I remember, like, when something like Davos happened several years ago, I already had that politics of like, fuck these people. But there still was this sense that like, well, they're in command, right? And now when you look at something like that, on one hand, it's like, yeah, still, I mean, this is an unbelievable concentration of just raw economic, political, cultural power. And on the other hand, it's like, these people are insane. Like, they're in a fun house.
Right.
And they have nothing to do with anything that's happening outside of it, for good or for ill.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Like, the world could be much worse, the world they want, or it could be much better, but they have nothing to do with either of it. They're just like...
Yeah. No, I remember that what drove that home for me, I got a call from somebody who worked in Treasury in 2009, and they were telling me about, this was right after the crash,
right.
That they had a briefing, and this was during like the Geithner period, for all the senior people at Treasury, and it was all about what the population thinks and what they're feeling, right? And
oh boy,
and they brought in a whole bunch of retailers, right? This is just before like the holiday season, and it was the sort of Walmart types, Target, et cetera, and they're basically saying, well, we're not seeing a lot of consumer confidence because people have no money and they're not buying anything, and there's a lot of pain out there, and you should be cognizant of that. And that's where they got that information. You know what I mean? Like that
is unbelievable.
You know what I'm saying? Like so
that's insane.
You have this that for me perfectly illustrates what goes on with these people. Like they're
you need,
so
like, the
far
chief
removed.
Revenue officer of Target to tell you that a
Right.
global economic meltdown has affected people's sense of economic security. Wow.
Right? I mean, and those are the
Right.
people who are making decisions about political strategy. If they're so out of touch with where people's heads are at, like how can they possibly like know like what's sexy and what isn't? You know what I mean? Yeah.
They need a shared sense of purpose. School uniforms. It's the only way to defeat Trump, but share a common culture.
I don't have much of a living memory of the 90s at all. Like, I basically remember on the Millennium playing Super Nintendo. That's about my memory of the 90s days. But I also, like, now I'm getting this image. I used to think it'd be like the Don't Stop, Think About Tomorrow, and Spice World and all this fun euphoria stuff.
Right.
And now I think of, like, a terrifying world where, like, there's a New York Times on the counter and people like nodding along to Tom Friedman, and you feel like the crazy one for being like, this is not it, guys.
Yeah.
Is that what I bet it did.
Those were the heady days of Tom Friedman's electronic herd columns. Remember those? Those were awesome.
I read because I read Lexus and the Olive Tree.
Great book.
And there was where please explain electronic herd in a second when we go to the post game. But do you remember I think it's in Lexus and the Olive Tree. He's in Thailand, and at this point, already like you're just dizzy reading this shit. You're just like, because this was before it was like a joke. There really was actually.
That's what I'm saying.
No, you're absolutely right. But this is even in 2002, 2003, like. And it's like, and it literally is like, my plane. Because on one hand, it's also like, think of you're like, 18 years old or something, and you're interested in this stuff. You're also like dripping with envy because you're like, on one hand, this guy, this guy's an asshole, and on the other hand, like, he literally gets to write this and just paid like an unlimited expense account to travel, like. Like simultaneously, you want to in no way physically or ideologically be him, but in expense account and access be him in every possible way, right?
24 hours.
And also in terms of like lack of work ethic and zero accountability in terms of what you write. I should add that too. And so it's just the crazy book. And it's all basically just like, like, the Mexicans thought they could insulate themselves. Well, Larry Summers had a different idea. Like, it's all... He's in Thailand, And he's talking about some horrible things that, basically the International Monetary Fund has done to Thailand. That's probably like destroyed generations of rice farmers or stuff that he probably doesn't even think about.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And he's walking outside of his hotel, and there's a woman on the street. Do you remember this? I think you might have even mentioned it in one of your reviews. I'm not sure. There's a woman on the street who's, in actually really precursor of, she's trying to make her way in this economy, and she has a broken scale. Where you can pay her like, I don't know, the equivalent of like, I don't know, maybe a nickel to weigh yourself.
Yeah, this is coming back to me. Go ahead, yeah.
And so I'm reading this, and like a normal human, I'm like, oh my God, this is so depressing. There's this woman on the streets of Bangkok with a broken scale, and she's counting on like, I guess either really, really neurotic people about their weight or people who take pity on her to like weigh themselves. Like, and he literally is like, I stepped up to her, dropped my, I'll say, nickel in her pocket, and I jumped on her scale. And of course he had some like, couple more than I wanted, And he literally wrote it like this woman's heroically trying to like stake her claim in the global economy. And I think I was literally nauseous when I read that.
That's awesome. That's like that's the ultimate uplifting Thomas Friedman story, right? Everybody pulls his or herself up by their own bootstraps. Like it starts with weighing people on a scale. Next thing you know, she's going to be reading x-rays for doctors in Poland, right? Via the internet.
Right. She's going to be misdiagnosing cancer patients in Europe within a matter of weeks.
He's the best, man. I mean,
where is he now? I feel like he's kind of fallen off.
He's rich wherever he. I mean,
but he still writes those columns, right?
I haven't. Yeah, he does.
No, because he popped up a couple weeks ago with some like Hamas gave the flower of their youth to Israel.
Well,
hey, welcome back, Tom. Very elegant way of justifying a mass crime. Thank you.
The one I remember before that was about MBS, I think. Was that him? Was that Friedman?
No, I think Friedman. I'm sure Friedman's on MBS's dick. I mean,
yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Mohammed bin Salman was like made for Tom. Like Mohammed bin Salman was like created by Thomas Friedman in a lab. He's like a Saudi monarch who like reads like McKinsey reports. I mean, this is like perfect. An erection for days.
Contact your doctor if it lasts longer than. Yeah.
All right. Oh, here we go. Saudi Arabia's Arab Spring at last.
Oh, fantastic. Is there a taxi driver?
Yeah, you want to read the opening? Here, you know what? Before we go to the post game, and maybe we'll do a little bit more of it in the post game. Will you just even do the opening graph? Will you just do a little review here?
I never thought of. We have to do the tagline.
Okay.
Riyadh, Saudi Arabia dash. I never thought I'd live long enough to write this sentence. The most significant reform process underway anywhere in the Middle East today is in Saudi Arabia. Yes, you read that right. Though I came here at the start of the Saudi winter, I found the country going through its own Arab Spring, Saudi style. It's perfect. It's so perfect. What I love about him is that he fucking can't resist the metaphor. Like he has to go for a figure of speech even when it's not necessary.
Oh my God. All right, guys, we're going to keep doing this in the post game. It's time to become a patron. We are, we're closing in. I forgot where we were at when we started, but we're about 500 and something away from the first 2,000. So as always, thanks to now the first, what is it, like 1,450 something. 50 something. Appreciate all of you for sustaining this content, building it out. New Woke Bros with Big Waz and myself. We're talking about King James going to L.A. and Sacha Baron Cohen this week, and probably also arguing more about Drake. And then on this Sunday's Illicit History, we actually have an activism primer with this guy Joshua Kahn, who runs a group in the Bay on climate change, which is going to be sort of interesting tactically for people who want to do more sort of direct engagement. This past Sunday, the dissection of Steve Pinker with Merrick Sullivan of Oxford University, and the primers on Jamaica, on Iran, all the rest. There's a lot of content in there. I want to thank so much Matt Taibbi for being here and for continuing on the post game with us. I really appreciate your time, man. I want to thank all patrons. I want to thank super producer Matt Leck, head theoretician David Grisham, super producer David Slavic, and find us at patreon.com/TMBS which is what is it? Hashtag TMBS13, and also of course the Mohammed bin Salman show. We will see you in the post game. Thanks everybody.